Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming to hear about a part of my life that has been so exciting, my romance with the brain. I'm here to assure all of you that there is a possibility for super aging for every one of you in this room. And what I do is I apply neuroscience to practical application. I create the opportunity for you to rehearse skills that neuroscience indicates gives you the peace, the skills, the cognitive ability to super age. When I began this journey in 1982, people thought that I was absolutely crazy. You can't change the brain. As recently as 2008, I was at a major conference sitting next to a leading neuropsychologist, and she grabbed my arm and she said, "Please do not embarrass yourself and talk about brain plasticity," when he asked if we could change the brain. That was 2008, not so very long ago. So I have been beaten up in the back alleys of academia for a very long time. This is Marianne Diamond. In 1984, she proved that rats could change, their brain could change if we put them in cages similar to Disney World. Marianne Diamond is a premier neuroscientist. I had the pleasure of meeting with her, and she kept pushing me to continue my work, regardless of what other people said. She did a very interesting study, and it was repeated in Japan. And the rats in her study lived 120 days. The rats in Japan lived at 180 days. And what Marianne Diamond said was, "Oh, you must be feeding them rice. You must be doing something or speaking, or maybe it's the Japanese language that the rats like." They assured her they had taken her research protocol and absolutely flawlessly repeated it. They did it 3 times. Their experimental rats continue to live a third or more longer than our rats in the United States. She said, "Guys, hop on the plane, we're going to Japan." And her team from Berkeley went to Japan. And when they were there, they evaluated everything, they looked at everything, and then they said, "Well, we want to see the rat cages. Maybe there's something that we don't know. Maybe they had painted or done something or put some symbol in the corner or crystal, who knows." So they go into the lab and they look and they said, "What's happening? Why are you holding the rat?" And the researcher said, "Well, we don't have as many cages as you have in the United States. The cages in the United States were cleaned every day. But a clean cage was brought in, the rat was removed and put into the new cage. Here, the rat was fondled, was petted, was loved in a way for the 15 minutes to 30 minutes that it took the other researchers to clean the cage." What does that tell you about touch? What does that tell you about hugging? What does that tell you about things we can learn from this study in the aging process? So I share that with you and with this wonderful woman, and to read her research is really beautiful. This is Willis Harman. Willis Harman is professor emeritus from hundreds of universities. he met me, and I became part of his cadre of speakers across the world. Listen, it wasn't because it was me. It was because this man, Professor Reuven Feuerstein, really was changing lives one at a time throughout Israel and in parts of Europe. They were using Feuerstein technique. Well, anyone who knows the culture, Feuerstein would say, of course, I'm coming, I'll be there. And then at the last moment, he wasn't there. And they knew they could call me the American woman who knew Feuerstein's work, who would come and speak on his behalf. And so that's how these famous people, these three who were world famous researchers, really supported my work, really gave me the impotence to remain resilient despite the naysayers in the culture. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is the person who evaluated flow. You know, when you're in that moment that nothing, you're not hungry, you're not angry, you're doing something that's so much fun for you that you just, nothing else matters. And what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi found out was we weren't happiest in front of the television. We weren't happiest alone reading a book. We weren't happiest doing all of the things that people think, oh my goodness, you can retire, let's do this, no. We were happiest when we were challenged. We were happiest when we were being pushed to a different place. That's when we were the happiest. And he used to introduce me, a charming, charming man, just lovely. He was at the University of Chicago, and then he moved to California and taught there. And he used to say, okay, now that I've told you everything theoretical about the brain, happiness, intrinsic motivation, Donalee, come on up here and tell them, give them the practical aspect, how they can get there too. So for these scholars, this neuroscientist, this philosopher, and this wonderful researcher, I was really supported in my work to move forward. I met Professor Feuerstein in 1983. I was captivated by the article written by Paul Chance in October of 1981, when he talked about his opportunity to actually change the brain of Holocaust victims who were living in Israel. It was a beautiful piece of work, and it just changed my life. I was just shy of finishing my dissertation at Northwestern. They had made me a very nice offer to stay at the Kellogg School, which is certainly well respected, and I was excited until I read this article. And I said, you know what? I've got to pursue this. I have to find out more about this work and continue this work in my beloved America, where so many people have not had the pleasure of the education that I was given. I wanted to give people a second chance. So Feuerstein, I approached Feuerstein on the idea of developing a higher functioning or more difficult exercises to address a capable population. Feuerstein was used to working with children and adults who scored below average. I recognize that if below average can go up, the rest of us who are average could really go far. So I wanted to give everyone that opportunity. And we worked together from 1983 until 2008. And to be very honest, he was not happy I created digital programs. And I told him, we don't ask starving children not to eat at McDonald's because it's not the healthiest meal. We are starving for exercises. We are starving to maximize intelligence among a democratic community. We are starving for these kind of skills. We cannot assume that we're going to meet the needs of every individual person. We have to give them something to sustain themselves. This is Chris Williams in 1997. Chris called me on the phone from NASA, and she said, Donalee, she said, this is Chris Williams from NASA. And I said, oh, everyone always thought I was out there. I thought it was a joke. I had no relationship with NASA. I had no idea who she was. And there was silence. Chris is pretty serious. I said, okay. I said, this is really NASA? And what? She said, yes. And she came to visit my arsenal of materials and to hear what I had to say in 97. And then in 98, I competed for the NASA Critical Thinking Project against our leading universities. And Chris was a strong proponent of mine, and I was with NASA from 1998 until 2007. And it was a gift to work with engineers and scientists who were humble, who were brilliant, who had a sense of humor, who shared ideas. I mean, it was, in some time, if you ever catch me any place, I'll tell you about the experiences. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. But no one else cared that I had been with NASA. It was almost like there was a reverse discrimination. Oh, pooey. I don't know. She wasn't. Who cares? Okay. Then this man walked into my office in 2008 and said, he walked in and he at times became a different person. His body gyrated. His knees weakened. He was writing at the table to do some of my work, my evaluation, and he fell off the chair. I had never seen that. This is Professor Clark Elliott. He is a professor of artificial intelligence. He went to Berkeley and audited physics and calculus when he was 10 and a half. His 5 children were being taken away from him, and there was a thought of putting him in an institution. He had been in a car accident, had suffered a concussion, and he had been to Northwestern University of Chicago. He had been all over, and no one was able to help him. The woman who was taking care of his household work, not cleaning, his checkbook, his making sure the kids got off, whatever, little things like that, said, you're not going to believe this. I was at a cocktail party, and I heard about this woman in Highland Park. And I heard she does amazing work, but most important, she's honest. And if she can't help you, she'll try and find you someone who can. Well, Clark came to me, and after he fell off the chair, I honestly said to him, I have never seen anything like this. I have to think about it. I don't want to take your money right now. Can I please call you later after I've given it some thought? And I did, and I saw when I walked him to the door the tears in his eyes. It I still see it. That night, I figured it out. So at 6:30, I found him. No answer. I kept calling consistently until 9:30 at night, and finally I got an answer. And I said, "Where in the hell have you been?" I was fearful that I wasn't going to see him again, and that it was my fault. Of course it wasn't my fault, but I said it was. I don't know. Anyway, he said, "You called me back." I said, "Yes, I figured it out. When you use the occipital lobe, your eyes, your entire nervous system breaks down. I know how to help you." And this was the journey. So he worked with me, and he worked with Dr. Deborah Zielinski. And together, in 6 months, he was not 100%, but I think he was kind of 95, which is very good. He could function, he could take care of his 5 children, and he said to me, "I'm going to chronicle my journey for everyone else, and I'm going to make you famous." Okay. I thought he was going to make me famous. I mean, if NASA couldn't do it, I didn't know what else we were going to try. So I said, and my husband Norman, who was sitting over there in the blue shirt, he would say to me, Clark would give me 200 pages to read. He had 1,500 pages to help him consolidate. No one's going to read 1,500 pages. And to help him consolidate and to be accurate in his appraisals of his functioning and what was going on. So I would be up late at night, and my husband would say, "Donalee, who's going to read the book? Go to sleep. You're getting older. You better go to sleep. Forget the book. No one's going to publish it. No one's going to read it." Well, who knew? It went viral. And Clark Elliott totally changed my practice. It was corporate and children, and after his book was published in 2015, it became 80% concussion patients from all over the world. Singapore, Japan. People would call me and I'd say, "Wait, this is a long plane ride. Let's talk about what's really going on." Australia. And not only in the United States, but from far distances. I just want my life back. And because I had the wonderful opportunity of working at NASA for 7 years, 8 years, I had accumulated. It forced me to create instruments for high-functioning adults. I mean, I don't know if I would have wanted, if I would have sat down and written these instruments or these puzzles if it hadn't been for Chris Williams and giving me, and I hadn't had all the contracts repeated at NASA, in all honesty. It is long, hard work. And when Clark came, I could use my NASA work because he was so brilliant. The people who had worked with him before didn't have the tools I had to challenge him to get him back to his level of functioning, his high level of functioning. Okay. Deborah Zielinski educated me for 30 years. Actually, now it's for 33 years in the occipital lobe and visual processing. I'm going to be speaking at the Brain Mapping Society in April on teachable intelligence. Visual processing is teachable intelligence. How with balancing the visual systems, we have an opportunity to access neural pathways in areas of the brain that very few have an opportunity to access. So I thank Dr. Zielinski for educating me. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that every one of my children helped me in my classes, came to me to conferences, supported my work, my men, my boys, my 3 boys, 1, 2, 3, built ramps for people who visited me in wheelchairs, because I'm not wheelchair access, without ever complaining, without ever saying, Mom, what are you doing? This has got to, never. They answered the phone, they did my Xeroxing. They would say to me, this one, the middle one, who is Rod, the oldest, he would say, Mom, did you know that people take their kids on Disney cruises and to the Caribbean on vacation? We have been to more conferences with you. I said, isn't it great? You met all these exciting people and they had such wonderful things to say. Well, I was doing all of this. They supported me. Lindsay came to me with NASA when I needed her to. Brent and Gavin came to me to the University of Pennsylvania when I was working with Norman Badler on a project. So, and my husband has supported me emotionally and financially, because writing apps is one big chunk of money. And he has supported with never saying, it's enough already, we're not making ends meet here, maybe we'll take some, never. They have all supported me. And these are the little people. I have 3 daughter-in-laws, and it's one thing for your sons to allow you to participate with your grandchildren, for your sons or your daughters to be very supportive of your work. All of my daughter-in-laws have helped me immensely in communications, in little things that I needed done around the house or in my practice. So usually you thank people at the end. I think I have to thank them at the beginning. We are a very educated community. 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep. Sleep is the time that you have an opportunity to clean, like a vacuum cleaner, to clean the areas of your brain, okay? Sleep is the opportunity you have. It takes approximately 15 minutes for most people to fall asleep. Then you prepare, like you would prepare your garage before you started cleaning it. There's a preparation stage where you kind of move this over here, and then you start cleaning, okay? And that's what happens. It's in the 3rd stage of sleep that you really are cleaning the areas of your brain. And last February, I was at a conference from Northwestern, and the head of neuroscience there said, someone asked in the audience, what's the #1 thing for SuperAging? And they said, it is sleep. You have to clean out the cobwebs. And so sleep is very important. So the 3rd stage is where you clean, and the 4th stage is where sometimes a creative idea comes up. But it's very exciting. Then there's stress management. Here we go. The 4 stages of sleep. And we want to have 7 to 9 hours so that we get at least 3 cycles in. 3 to 4, 3-4 cycles in. The second speaker at Northwestern last February said, stress. We all have stress. Anyway, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have stress. You go, you want to be able to go into that mindful, meditative state, reorganize your brain. This woman, Candace Pert, in 1972, linked the mind and the body. She was at Johns Hopkins, and she was dissecting pigs. She said, oh my God, this pig ate a brain, because we thought peptides were only in the brain. Well, everyone knows pigs don't eat brains. Then she was dissecting a lamb, and she found some peptides in his knee. Oh, then she went to her colleagues and she said, you're not going to believe this. 3 men, you're not going to believe this. I found peptides in other places in the body. She wrote 127 papers on her finding. And then, I don't know if many of you are familiar with the Nobel Prize, the structure. You go from, there's a certain conferences, or certain places you have to present. The Nobel Prize is only shared by, can only be shared by 3 people, never 4. Now, ladies, what do you think those 3 men did? You want to take a guess? They invited her to sit at the table when they presented before they were going to be nominated for the Nobel Prize. When she realized what had happened, she had a hissy fit. She was persona non grata all through academia. They didn't get the Nobel Prize. They couldn't even apply for it. But she too had to leave the university and go someplace else. Now, her later work was done with Deepak Chopra in 2008. And there is a book she wrote. It's called Molecules of Emotion. It's a wonderful book. I think it's under, if it's not 100, 110 pages, it's very short. And she talks about her journey. It is a fascinating story. She is a lovely lady. She has YouTube presentations. Unfortunately, we lost her to cancer. About 10 years ago. And I was asked to speak at a charity function with very sophisticated people. And I said, what am I going to do? Talk about exercise and sleep? I think they know it. Some were physicians. I'm going to talk about stress and how stress is worse for you than cigarette smoking. And we all know what cigarette smoking does. And if you are a perfectionist, get to the doctor ASAP. There is no such thing as being perfect. And that is just adding to your stress. And we talk, and then when I was looking up, making certain I had dates right, I had her research right, I just always checking myself. I found out that she had died 10 years earlier on the day I had spoken, September 18th. And I said, maybe her later research wooey-wooey wasn't so wooey-wooey. Maybe I should start looking at that. What are the chances that I would have chosen to speak about Candace Pert? She has some very cute videos. Now, here we have a healthy brain, and here we have a healthy brain, and here we have a brain that's not healthy. And you can see how it's communicating. The more you have going on, the better it is, okay? The more highways. This is Sarah Lazar. Sarah Lazar is a researcher at Harvard, a neuroscientist, and she thought that meditation, mindful meditation, and yoga were for wimps. And Sarah was a runner. When she injured her leg, Sarah went to, someone said, go into a yoga class. You got to do something. She went once, she went twice, she went 3 times. Her story's beautiful, and she's a brilliant woman who speaks eloquently. And she became the naysayer. The naysayer became a proponent of yoga and Deepak Chopra. And she did the neuroimaging on and she did the neuroimaging on the Dalai Lama. And she showed that he's the happiest person in the world, and why he's the happiest person in the world, and what neural pathways connected. And we have today Missy, who's going to give you opportunities to learn what Sarah Lazar studies so that you can benefit from her studies and do it yourself and become the happiest person in the world too. Stay physically active. This is my sister Sherry. Sherry, raise your hand. Sherry's there. And Bob, my wonderful brother-in-law. And physical exercise is very important. What we're finding is even snacking exercises where you're just standing here for a minute and you're just moving your body, you go against a wall, just isometrics. Anything to get yourself moving is wonderful. And they did this picture for me. I hate to use stock pictures. I know enough people. And Sherry and Bob really keep me socialized because I can go down a rabbit hole, you know, with my work. I know it doesn't always look like it, but I can really go down more than, and this, social ties correlate with lower risk of dementia. This is my dear friend Kathy. Kathy, raise your hand. Kathy provided me with these wonderful photos. Kathy's the most social person I know. She knows everyone in Pelican Bay and around the world, and all through the Midwest you mention, and she knows them, and it's wonderful. What we find is there's a book being written, Neuroscience and Friendship. Friendship and the brain, and why the brain needs and wants friends, by Ben Ryan. It's coming out shortly. And he's a neuroscientist who studies the opportunities and what happens when the brain doesn't have friends. So friends and sharing ideas with people, even if their ideas are different than yours are, trying to understand where their perspective is. If someone is talking about something that totally annoys you, at least you have an opportunity to learn from that experience, never to talk like that again, you know, learn from how they're presenting or learn from what they're saying so that you grow in new ways. So in isolation, we find that the brain actually shrinks. And this is neuroscience. This isn't my woo-woo-y idea. This is, you can look on the web. There's all of these wonderful research studies on this. So socialization helps you regulate your perspective, reduce stress, and do all kinds of wonderful things. Okay, this was me in 1984. I started doing postdoctoral work with Feuerstein here. And here, this was the last, no, I think I went to Israel one more time, the second to the last time that I worked with him. The CNN Bob, what was his name? Now I've forgotten, but he was in Israel with us and he was doing a wonderful documentary on Feuerstein. He was killed in a car accident. He was on 60 Minutes, if you remember, about 8 years ago. And anyway, this was the workshop with Professor Roy Feuerstein. He used context-free materials, and context-free materials should not be a surprise to anyone in the United States. If you've seen an IQ test, it's all context-free materials. If they're evaluating you that way, why isn't there a way that we can begin to treat, to teach in that way? Not totally. I mean, we all want to know history and other things. But anyway, okay. Here are the two biggest leaders in SuperAging today. First, Tamar Geffen, who was at Northwestern, who was counting, who cares, counting the von Econ neurons post-mortem in the brain of SuperAgers at Northwestern. That's not my thing. But what Tamar found out in 2019 was that in the cingulate cortex, in the cingulate gyrus, the little fold in there, as she was counting these neurons in a microscope, she said, you know, it's strange. All of the SuperAgers have a thickened area of the brain. It's small, very, very small, you know, like the top of my nail there. But they all have it. And right here, okay? So right here. And she saw this, and Northwestern just took off with it. They're just doing more and more research. They have a SuperAger study. That's people over 80 who come in and take neuropsych testing and have their blood drawn every couple of months and do the testing, and they monitor their aging. If they're over 80 and they perform like someone in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, on the standardized testing, they're considered a SuperAger. If you don't, you're not considered a SuperAger. And many of the SuperAgers donate their brain to Northwestern for post-mortem science. And at that time, this lady gets to work in her laboratory with your brain. And she's finding some wonderful things. What's interesting is she has found that the one characteristic that is consistent among all SuperAgers is they're gregarious. And in addition to being gregarious, the cup is always half full. They're anxious to learn, and they're flexible. Some of them smoke. Some of them drink too much. And all of them have gone through life experiences that force them to be resilient. Whether it was war, it was the Holocaust, it was an injury, whatever it was, they had resilience. And we all know about the book Grit. You know, everyone talks about resilience and grit. Well, grit is in this area of the brain, right here. And that's what Tamar found. Now, one of my children lives in Boston, and he's kind of a character. And he was at a cocktail party, and he meets the head of neuroscience at Harvard. And he said, oh, you're not going to believe this. My mother does this work and this. And I said, Brent, why'd you say anything? He's not interested in what I'm doing. And he was interested. And Randy Buckner is a wonderful researcher and scientist who is looking at the hubs in your brain that are responsible for communicating long distances to areas that we never thought that they could reach. In other words, think of it as we have influencers, social influencers. And these social influencers, oh my goodness, they're spanning across oceans. They're making changes in places that you never thought they would make changes. That's what he studies. He studies these blue areas, and he's trying to track them. And you say, well, who cares? Well, I'll tell you who cares. I care. Because if I know where they're going, and he figures out what the function is, I can create the puzzles for you to learn that skill so you, too, can be, have all of these hubs of operation in your brain. And the more neural pathways you have, the more areas the more opportunities you have for thinking, but the more opportunities, if God forbid you have a stroke or an injury, you can rebound. This is almost like saving money. You have saved money for retirement, you can save neurons and neural pathways for problems that may come up. And we all know it happens, right? Things happen. So these are the two people that have been very supportive of my work recently. And he even gave me the last evaluative tool that they're using at Harvard. And so I said, listen, you wrote 40 instruments that you're testing people on time after time. Why not put it through, with your geniuses there, and create the opportunity for the rest of us to benefit from your work and rehearse it? He said, there's a very big difference between evaluating and teaching. I said, I know, I want you to do it. He said, no, I don't want to do it. I want to evaluate, I want to figure this out, and I'm giving it to you so you can do it. And so I am now working on an app that mirrors this as best I can. My poor husband is probably dizzy from all the times he's had to test it. And it's very exciting for me because I'll bring it to you. Tamar's work, this area right here, the mid-cingulate gyrus, what it does is it links the auditory and visual processing. What does that mean? It means when I look at you, I see you, but in my mind, I use words to describe what I see you. What does the link mean? If I read a story, I see pictures. So you link the visual and the auditory. And that's exciting because that's what she said is responsible for the piece of the brain that's responsible for superaging. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex.
One sec.
Oh, who said that? Somebody said that.
Working on that. Sorry, I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
What's happening there? Siri. She wants to be here too. Very nice. This is a game I created based on the work at Northwestern. It's called M3. It's a cognitive tool that links auditory and visual integration. It's a digital game design. There are opportunities for you to play it thousands of times without getting the same images, okay? And it gives you practice, or you can test yourself. You do whatever you want. You can test and get a score. You can practice and get a score. However you want to use it, it's available on my website. And you can track your performance. Visual imagery are the pictures you see in your head. And the ability to maintain visual imagery is very important. Is important for mathematics. It's important for finding your way around the block. It's important for navigating your life through the dark, at night, not making a misstep. Visual imagery is pattern recognition. All of these things are documented in neuroscience. Internal dialogue gives your working memory, the short-term memory, an opportunity to become long-term memory. I need a gallon of milk, a stick of butter, and a bag of cereal. And you may repeat that over and over and over again. The important thing is to have this internal dialogue consistent. Some people have an internal dialogue that's only abusive. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. I made a mistake. We have to reduce stress, and we have to go back to, we want the internal dialogue to be similar to a guiding parent. Yes, this was you did this and it was a mistake, but in order to correct it, you have these opportunities, and how brave of you to want to change in that nice way. So we give ourselves compliment sandwiches. This is what we find SuperAgers do. The reason that words are so important was discovered in 2016 and then recorded for me to read in 2019. This is the word map. We used to think that all words were stored in a specific area of the brain. Wrong. Technology to the rescue. At Berkeley, they put participants into an MRI, and it was a functional MRI, and they highlighted the areas of the brain that were stimulated with different words, and then they color-coded it. How brilliant. I love this study. I'd love to do a study like this. And so you can see the areas of the brain. If you look at blue, if we mention something outdoors like camping, oh my goodness, look at this, oh my God, all the different pathways we have to handle that. So you may have a specific pathway, like to remember certain words, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be accessed in other ways. So this word map actually, it supports the whole concept of the metacognitive conversation in your brain. This is a sample of the game. And so we're going to play it in a very kind of interesting way. All I want you to do is, if you see a picture more than once, you may see a picture just once. If you see it twice, you can hit your leg or clap your hands, okay? You can hit your leg or clap your hands. And we're going to see if using your vision is as powerful as using your auditory and your visual. This is the contribution that Tamar Geffen and Randy Buckner were so excited with, because this is the core of SuperAging. Okay, ready? So get ready, pay attention. Okay? Oh, no, I don't want practice mode. Hold it, hold it. Let me see. What happened here? Just a moment. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Good job. Great job, everyone. Now, you did a great job. And this was just using your eyes. Now, I did this with my techies, okay? And I did this with my husband, they didn't think that it made such a big difference when you talk. Watch, if you have a voice in your head, the difference in how you approach the problem.
Red hat with pearl necklace, bow. Pink backpack, white shoes, sunny garden. Chocolate cupcake with assorted gold toppings. Red hat with pearl necklace, bow. Silhouette of tennis player at sunset. White fedora, bold blue band. Pink backpack, white shoes, sunny garden. White fedora, bold blue band. Tennis player, green ball, dynamic pose. Man in teal tracksuit, green sunglasses. 6 cupcakes with green swirl frosting. White fedora, bold blue band. Chocolate cupcake with assorted gold toppings. Black baseball cap, textured fabric. Man with camera near waterfall. Tennis racket and ball on court. Young girl, orange backpack, white top. Black backpack, 2 metallic bottles. 3 chocolate chip muffins, wooden board. 6 cupcakes with green swirl frosting. 6 chocolate cupcakes with orange slices. Person meditating at sunset, waterfront. Woman with braided hair and black hat. Tennis player, white shirt, floating ball. Woman practicing yoga on rooftop. Tennis racket and ball on court. Colorful striped party hat, pom-pom top. Tennis racket and ball on court. Woman meditating in yellow sportswear. 3 yellow cupcakes, white heart toppings. Tennis player, green ball, dynamic pose. 6 chocolate cupcakes with orange slices. Man with backpack overlooking beach. Blue backpack, autumn forest setting. 6 chocolate cupcakes with orange slices. Woman meditating in nature, white outfit. Woman doing yoga on wooden bridge. Man doing handstand, blue sky background. 2 patriotic cupcakes, flags and sprinkles. Woman meditating in yellow sportswear. Woman practicing yoga on rooftop. 3 bright green knitted hats. Man doing handstand, blue sky background. Pink backpack, white shoes, sunny garden. Silhouette of tennis player at sunset. Woman practicing yoga on rooftop. Man with camera near waterfall. Female tennis player, white outfit, net. Blue backpack, autumn forest setting. 3 bright green hats.
Okay, now this game has probably at this point 10,000 permutations using different images and 12 different categories. Every 3 months, I'm trying to upgrade. So this is the beginning, and I just came out with an intermediate level, and over time, we'll have an opportunity to up the ante. Intermediate, advanced, expert. So the expert's really hard, because I've started to pick out some pictures. They're impossible to differentiate. You really have to be fast. But the nice thing is I have put a feature in the game that changes the speed. So if you need more time to learn, like anything else, that's okay. And then over time, you can change the speed. But there are opportunities to do other exercises, other parts of it. This is Aging Brain Boost. This is a precursor to the M3. It's in the brochure, and it's available on your iPhone or your iPad. And you get to pick the music and the style that you want the game to be in, whether you want it in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. Man's mind, stretched to a new idea, never returns to its original place. I hope in some small way I have stretched all of your minds to new ideas, and you aren't the same people that you were when you walked in. Thank you.